Greetings everyone, Steve from G.I. Joburg here, and yes, your eyes do not deceive you. This is Steve's Top 10 Modern Era Figures and Vehicles. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, G.I. Joburg does have a very vintage slant. But that's not to say we don't like the modern era stuff too. Quite the contrary. You see, if it was available, brick and mortar style in this country, I would find no excuse not to buy it. Unfortunately, the last modern era toys we had were Rise of Cobra stuff, which got us onto the modern era tip, that's for sure, and showed us the beauty of that construction and also all the modern features. But unfortunately, in the race, for me personally, between vintage and modern, vintage is always going to edge it out. I suppose it must be those sweet vehicles. But let me say this, modern era G.I. Joe figures are the finest figures ever produced, ever. They are walking, living, breathing, movable works of art. They are fantastic figures for posing, for customizing, for expressing the ultimate versions of classic characters. So here are my top 10 modern era figures, with a few vehicles for good measure. Kicking us off, we have a trio of vehicles. I thought about splitting these guys up and interspersing them into the list, but they just work so well as a trio, I had to deal with them all together. It'll also save me on repeating myself, because what these guys have going for them is they bring back the OG 13 Green Team vibe, but with all the bells and whistles of modern era construction. They're tough, they have clear plastic glass for the headlights and canopy, and they fit so nicely together. One might argue that the Mobat should have a place in this list, but I never really warmed to the Mobat. It could only ever hold one figure and seemed to be designed around a different scaling. These guys are the new OG-13 de facto Mobile Strike Force vehicles. The Skyhawk makes its place into this list because it is close air support par excellence. It fits in with the very small attack vehicle, very potent punch. I mean, it is armed to the teeth, machine guns, cannons, rockets. And it really, really works as a G.I. Joe close air support, what with the expanded running boards or foot skids with the pegs. It's perfect. If I was to rank these guys as a trio, I'd put the Ram as number 10, the Vamp as number 9, and the Skyhawk. You know I love flying planes around. The Skyhawk would be my number 8. It is amazing. I had no feeling towards the vintage Skyhawk. This is the toy that made me love the Skyhawk as a design and as a function. This thing is small, it can get in anywhere. It now has a little bit of glass, which is so important to protect the pilot. It's not frail like the original. It has an additional forward thruster. I mean, this thing must have about 10 seconds worth of fuel. But besides that, it's got such a lot of cool playability. And even adds a removable panel. I mean, if that isn't an old school affectation that I'm so glad to see this thing reintroducing. I mean, removable panels were the rage in the vintage line. I'm surprised the old school Skyhawk didn't have one. The Vamp is the Vamp. It's aggressive, it is synonymous with the original 13, and if you are a fan of that era of G.I. Joe, you have to have the Vamp. You covet the Vamp. The Vamp is excellent. This has lowered seating to allow 25th anniversary figures and allow even vintage figures to fit more comfortably inside it, which is important. The vintage Vamp was a bit of a squash. You'd often have the awkward thing of the figure's head poking up beyond the roll bar, which sucked. The only problem is these hoses make the cannon a little bit less maneuverable than its vintage counterpart, but you can always pop them off, giving you that full 360 degree. Not quite as much elevation as you used to have. We lost something there, but that's why it is my number 9. Removable bedroll, removable entrenching tool, the flip up engine cover. It's a fantastic toy. The Ram, what can you say? It is a motorbike. It does everything the original does and more. It is durable. It hasn't cost any of its durability with the new features. The front fork and steering handles are linked. The cannon now twists not very well. You have to maybe twist the main body of the gun to get it to move. And what's more, these bad boys are not only removable like the vintage, but also can have a surprise little payload. Fantastic. And they don't feel like they're going to break. Hey, check that out. That's a Marauder Inc. Mac 10. Obviously, it comes off. The kickstand is still functional. These pipes are now picked out in a different color plastic. It's everything the original was and more. A valid improvement. And that is the highest goal, I think, of the 25th anniversary. If they can achieve that, they have won me over. Next up, time for a figure. And this is the sexiest figure ever made. 2009's Baroness. Oh my word. She looks good holding anything, but she also looks equally good with nothing in her hands but her slinky waist. She is gorgeous. She takes a truly sexy vintage figure and just elongates her, gives her more feminine slenderness and sleekness. And the factor that convinced me to purchase this figure, I saw her in a Dio story and I saw that ass. And if that is not the most perfectly sculpted ass in this scale and with this incredible articulation, I mean, fine, you can sculpt amazing female forms, but for her to be able to do everything that a modern era action figure should be able to do it's a work of art. It's the sexiest action figure I own in this scale. And because I'm a 3 3/4 inch guy, that would make her the sexiest action figure I own. But she comes in at number 7. At number 6, we have another female. Cobra's First Lady is outdone by G.I. Joe's First Lady. What can I say? I'm a Joe fan at heart. And Scarlet in her 25th anniversary version is my favorite Scarlet ever. Granted, she doesn't have very great competition, but this figure can achieve a two-handed pistol grip. Okay, it's not exactly right for her classic crossbow. I'd much rather have her grip it along the length of the underside, like so. But she is an exquisite figure and somewhat underrated. She has some articulation issues that I have corrected by shaving her crotch. Yeah, I know. But she can achieve some interesting things that other figures can't. I mean, she can do some sort of like very anime splay to her legs because she has this weird anomalous knee joint. But it's cool. It allows her to kind of achieve maybe a cross-legged sit, which is cool. Almost there. But I like her. She has the right mix of like the classic look, and she looks good in a modern era display. And she's got all the bells and whistles, some sculpted elements that pop out, and belted elements that are also removable. She's got the shurikens. She doesn't have the derringer, but that's okay too. And she looks so damn cute and feminine. Very important. A Scarlet that looks like a woman. Can I get a round of applause? Yes, thank you. Number 5 goes to my first Joe character, Lifeline. This time, he's one bad-ass dude. Amazing the amount of character you get just from this head sculpt. I mean, his original O-ring figure was a little derpy. He looked friendly, he looked approachable. This guy looks serious. He looks like a hardened professional rescue trooper. He looks like he's seen some shit. And as a result, he really adds a veneer of seriousness to a figure that should be taken seriously. Lifeline is so often lampooned for his non-violent stance. Well, this guy goes and has a removable pistol on his chest. I mean, make of that what you will. How that adds to the controversy of Lifeline. I suppose you could choose to display him without it, but I kind of like the idea of the moral ambiguity. I mean, he definitely does have a knife sheath, and while you might argue, yep, that's medically useful, it's also a combat knife. He has a wealth of accessories. I mean, you can create the most detailed of Dio stories just with this figure and a patient. I mean, you've got defibrillators, you've got various molded details and removable ones, like this IV line and fluid, which you can put together to form a complex arrangement on his included stretcher. It's quite remarkable. Wow, wow, wow. If you don't have this figure in your modern era collector, well, get up your ass, man. He might be a non-com, but he is the man, and one hell of a toy. Whew. Next up, a classic. Part of the 1982 lineup, realized very, very magnificently. It's the Cobra Trooper. This guy does it for me, in ways that the original never can. Because of his pedigree, the original 1982/1983 Cobra Trooper is the signature look for the Cobra blue shirt, but it just looks a little dumpy. It obviously came from the earliest beginnings of G.I. Joe, and the sculpting wasn't quite as refined as it got towards the latter part of the vintage run, which I so adore. So you're left with a figure that kind of looks out of place. This guy, oh my word, you could troop build him ad infinitum. He is fantastic, menacing, but very real. That's a human being right there. He's not a brainwashed stormtrooper. He is a bad dude about to do some bad things, and this is the most gorgeous blue. It's the perfect Cobra blue. If only Cobra's palettes would always use this blue. This figure is perfection, and makes use of a very, very good set of legs, giving him all the bells and whistles of a silenced sidearm, a combat knife, removable knee pads, though I don't know why you'd want to remove them in the first place. Better to just glue them in place. He's got his signature little, I don't know, discreet pistol sculpted in there. Tantalizingly, it's not removable. But he comes with the Dragunov, and that is what you need. These guys rock so hard. We're into our final three. Who's it gonna be? Well, at number 3, Storm Shadow. This was the Renegades release, which I quite like. Before the sculpt was done to death, it was Storm Shadow. And I like the modesty of his arms being covered up. I kind of wished the original had that as well. But it was the 80s. He had somewhat of a He-Man look going for him in the comic book, with his exposed arms everywhere. But this guy is true to what I expect a ninja to look like. And boy, oh boy, is he supported well by his accessories. I mean, come on, this backpack is a work of art. The original was great. This takes it a step further with painted parts. It doesn't have to hinge anymore, which was always a breakage concern. Instead, it snaps right off, which is perfectly fine. It's got these little claws at the foot, which allow it to hold, oh my word, so much stuff. Size, the best size in this scale, and you get a pair of them for Raphael action. He comes with a fan. Yeah, this is a soft form weapon for you Asian martial arts fans. I mean, what an intriguing inclusion, and I've never seen Storm Shadow use one, but I bet he could do some pretty nasty things with a fan. Throwing dirks, nunchucks, which use a cord. I mean, we're not quite high budget enough to have actual chain link, but this is a nice compromise. It certainly beats having a molded plastic piece. He comes with throwing stars or shuriken, which I believe also attach somewhere, but I never take them out for fear of losing them. This is an impressive figure. Storm Shadow is good, but he'll always play second fiddle to his sword brother Snake Eyes. Now, the Snake Eyes that gets most people's acclaim is the Pursuit of Cobra Snake Eyes that has the interchangeable visor or goggles head. And that is a formidable Snake Eyes, let me tell you. But he doesn't have one important thing going for him, and that's an animated series. A really, really cool animated series. City Strike Snake Eyes? He does. and he is my favorite modern era Snake Eyes. He's slender, he's sneaky, he's got a killer head sculpt, which is goggled, and he isn't all black. I like that he's two-tone. I like that he's got black combat trousers and a grey upper body. I like the use of colour on his head. There seem to be 3 different colour tones in play. The visor is a slightly lighter shade, which is spectacular. He's a beaut. His hands are great. I love the gloves. I love the knuckles being picked out in a lighter grey. He's just got winning details that really, really win me over. And this version needed to be hybridized with his later Resolute version, because this version came with an unfortunate problem. He had a sheath that was too long. I lopped it in half in order to get it more discreet behind his back. You see, it would just be way too long with this additional bit. And that's just a shame, because if you watch Resolute, if you're a fan of Resolute, you see exactly how discreetly how discreetly Snake Eyes is able to sheath his blade, and this was a bit of a letdown. So I tried my best to nip it and shorten it. I actually went as far as to cut the blade in order to get it shorter, but it still wasn't short enough. Fortunately, Hasbro corrected this mistake, giving him a short, very discreet sheath that looks screen accurate. It's a beauty. It's a beauty. Oh, I love this toy. No, man. Me and Snakes over here have had some good times. The weapon I choose to equip him with is not the one he was included with originally. It's once again the one that came with his squirrel suit version. And that's this, which is a fantastic all-purpose G.I. Joe arm. As shown in Resolute, it can go full auto. It has a sniper function. He can really crook it up there bring it up to his eyepiece, which is wonderful. Such a beautiful innovation of modern era figures, because the plastic is so forgiving, so bendable, and of course the wrists are articulated. So Snakes is an absolute badass, and this is my favorite version of him. He is my second favorite modern era action figure. So the way is clear for what? For who? For how? For who? For who? Who could it be? I'm getting delirious in anticipation. So let's get there. Off you go, Snakes. The finest modern era action figure I possess has got to be a classic, presented with all the bells and whistles that modern era construction and engineering has to offer. And I have to say, the one that does it better than anyone else is the Alley Viper. An absolute classic, presented so well, and with so many additional features, it just makes my eyes bleed. The visor's functional. The helmet's removable, leaving a balaclavaed head, which is cool. That's what you want your Alley Viper to look like. I did not like the latter balaclavaed head that he gets because it's too slender. This one fills out the helmet without any negative space. And it's got some interesting ribbing at the back. Who knew I'd say this much about the bloody head sculpt? The weapon is an improvement, I'd say. The signature classic gun is big and unwieldy and very fearsome, but this, it makes more sense. Even I can see the sense in that. And it is held very well by the figure, and also has the functionality that the original had, which is this. Oh yeah. Beautiful. The shield! The only G.I. Joe or Cobra action figure to include a shield that I'm aware of, and has an additional feature now with that nightstick or tonfa. It's fantastic. It's elongated, giving him better cover and also more offensive, I suppose, capability. I mean, this is a very aggressive shield. You could imagine impaling some hapless Joe on those prongs. Getting past the initial accessories, you've got the backpack, which now, yes, it's no longer tantalizing. You can remove the grapple gun. I include a black elastic, fabric elastic, just to correct the unfortunate malady that this figure has, which is no post. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the original 25th anniversary Defense of Cobra Island 7-pack version did not have that all very handy post, which fitted into the trigger guard to allow for this thing to attach securely. But my solution ain't half bad. Moving on to the base figure, or not quite the base yet, we still have this awesome vest, which I don't think I'll take off for your benefit. But bottom line is, he's got two removable daggers. They are dainty, they are accurate to his original, but they are removable. He is one lethal mofo. And a little detail that he got as a bonus from his base figure, which is the version 3 of Snake Eyes, is these little carabiners, which you can run a rope line through, and he can then do sort of a zip line assault, which is wonderful, and also kind of harks back to his file card. I mean, these guys are urban assault troopers. Naturally, they'd be ziplining down the sides of buildings and breaching into enemy-held territory that way. Fantastic figure, fantastic update, and this is a reason to love Modern Era, even if they are incredibly difficult to get your hands on. This is my mission statement. This is what Modern Era has given me. The ultimate versions of classic figures and characters that are so wrapped up in nostalgia. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, Steve's top 10 Modern Era figures and vehicles. You thought we wouldn't do it? Well, I went and did it anyway. I'm not such a vintage purist after all. Am I? Am I? Really? Hit like, hit subscribe, make the channel grow, all of those things. Share this video, comment, do what you want. Give me your top 10 favorite Modern Era figures and vehicles. Come on, man, let's compare lists. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Am I missing something really important? You tell me. Cool? Okay. Yo, Joe! And Star Wars.